Well, welcome to the Sports Guys. We're really glad you're back. How you doing, Rob?
Oh, doing great. Wearing my Oak Island sweatshirt and mentally starting to think about the beach.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, as you heard, everybody, we have a new tune that we're going to kick off at the beginning of our podcast every week. So, really happy that we're continuing to add functionality and trying to make the discussion more interactive. But anyway, thanks for coming this week. And as you can see behind us, Rob has a picture of a bunch of fans storming a basketball court. And behind me, I've got the NCAA symbol and a basketball court. So you can probably guess what our topic's going to be about this week. But it came out of this past weekend's action between Wake Forest University, Duke University. We had a court storming issue where Wake Forest upset Duke, quote unquote upset, when they were actually favored by two. But basically, it could be foreseen, I think, that anytime you beat Duke or UNC or Kentucky or one of those big teams, that you're probably going to have a court storming. Wake Forest students live for this type of moment. They don't get these kind of big moments very often. And so you had a court storming. It's been an issue the last couple of years. There've been a couple of different times where teams have done it, and the NCAA still hasn't found a way to wrestle with this issue. So, Rob, what are your initial thoughts coming out of that incident on Saturday?
Well, I think it was very regrettable. I know that if it happened to a team I cared about, I'd be pretty upset about it as well. When I look at it, it looked like mayhem. So my initial reaction was not enough security, and not it didn't seem like there was a plan in place. But I will say that a lot of the hyperbole around this has also bothered me, because I am not one who believes in getting rid of court storming or field storming. I think there's a way you can do it safely, and I think it's a more reasonable approach. I will just quickly talk about something that the reason I probably feel this way. When I was a freshman at the University of Virginia, we were a very good team that year, and towards the beginning of the season, we were going up against Clemson, and we had the longest losing streak in Division One history, um, going 32 straight losses or something
It
like
was
that.
29 straight. We were 0 and
29.
20
I
against
remember
them.
it was a lot. And we were really good, and I believe we were even favored. But it
Mhm.
was such a drought against Clemson that we beat them, and we rushed the field. And honestly, to this day, it's one of my top one or two memories in the entire time I was in college. So I don't want to take that away from a future student.
Mhm.
But I also look at what happened, and I see insanity. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive from each other, where you can still have a jubilant celebration with student and players together. It's so exciting to be there with your classmates who are just pulled off a huge win. But at the same time, there has to be protections. I don't want that to be the predominant thing, and then protections are secondary. So protecting the visiting team is paramount, but I don't think your only option is to get rid of court and field storming.
I totally agree with you. I remember that game like it was yesterday. I was a senior, and I also stormed the field just like you did, with our fraternity, and it was so exciting. I will say my son went to NC State University, and he said the two greatest moments of his 5 years at NC State as an engineer were the time that they stormed the court against Duke and the time they stormed the court against UNC. Both of those NC State wins, and of course the students were very excited because those are big time programs. So
Mhm.
this happens. The NCAA, in my opinion, has got to find a way to do something about this, but they have to do it in a way that doesn't take the joy and the fun out of the game, and we find a way to regulate it but not eliminate it. That's just my opinion on it.
Mhm.
Well, let's take a look at some of the clips. We're going to show you a couple of clips from this incident. We're going to show it from the side view. We're going to show it from the back view where it's a little slower motion. We're going to kind of go through the incident itself. I'm not sure it's quite the way that Filipowski describes it. He was the player who was injured from Duke. Um, so initially, I'm going to show you his quote right after the game, which obviously he was very emotional after getting injured. But then we'll go into some of the clips and we'll talk about each of those in between. So here comes the quote.
So Kyle's talking here about feeling like it was personal and definitely intentional. He says, a big guy like me, that trying to work my way off the court and they can't just work around me. He was kind of surprised at how much swarmed toward him. And he said there's no excuse for that. Obviously, he feels like it was intentional, and he said so. And I think that was a very normal reaction. I definitely wanted to give him benefit of the doubt. He was probably a little scared after he realized how big of a swarm of people was coming. But at the same time, I don't entirely agree with how he assessed it after looking at it a little bit closer.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Rob. I think that bottom line is that Filipowski was emotional. He was trying to react to what happened, and he was the injured player. I'm sure he was upset. He was disappointed by the result of the game as well. So I will mention his coach, who I do respect, after the game said that he thought the court storming practice should be completely banned, which I also don't agree with. But I think he also comes at it from an emotional standpoint. It wasn't just that they lost the game to Wake Forest, but he represents a school that traditionally has been stormed a lot by teams. Duke's a very big brand and huge name in basketball. With the huge players they've sent to the NBA and everything, and all the success with Coach K. So I think he comes at it from an angle that he's the coach of Duke, and Duke is one of the schools that really gets targeted by this type of court storming. What are your thoughts on what the coach said as well?
So when I did a little research, there's kind of a lot of research in every direction on this, actually. There's players that have been seriously hurt, one killed. Earlier this year, Kalen Clark got injured in a similar situation. So obviously there's a problem that needs to be addressed. The problem is, the question is, how far do you go in your resolution? But I mean, Duke itself, their fans are rabid. And in addition to that, Duke has rushed the court before. So they're not always just the victim of this. They certainly were having to deal with way too much chaos, where Wake Forest, in retrospect, needed to do a better job than what they did. No question. But it's kind of nuts to think about that a lot of this depends on where you sit, where you're watching it from. I think if this happened to your team, you'd be angry and frustrated.
Sure.
First, you had to swallow the loss, which was frustrating. And then you had to watch, this swarm of jubilation when you're feeling as down as possible. And then
by the way, your top 10 pick, who's going to go in the top 10 pick in the NBA. Yeah.
Then you see your players getting swarmed, and one of your best players, if not your best for sure, limping off and getting carried off in a sea of Wake Forest fans. So there's a lot of emotion there if you're a Duke fan. I do think that there are valid points for getting rid of court storming. I know the Clemson coach certainly wasn't emotional about it, and he called for it. So I don't just dismiss it offhand, but I do think there are ways that are more sensible than just getting rid of it. I think you can keep the positives of the court storming or field storming and take away some of the negatives and the safety issues. And I think that puts us in a better place than where we are today, or if we banned it. I think you get the positive without the danger.
For sure. Agreed. Well, we're going to look at a couple clips. I'm going to show the side view and the slow view back to back, and we'll make some commentary during those videos, and then we'll come back on the other side.
Years and an attendance record at Wake. 1.8 to go, Duke down by 4. On the inbounds, it's picked, and the party is on.
Students had already started positioning themselves on the floor. You don't see nearly enough security. And This is what we want to avoid.
He's being helped off by members of the Duke staff, and you saw the immediate bear hug surrounding him as this court storming is in full effect with Filipowski hobbled. Wow.
I look at that. I don't want to take that jubilation away from those students, but it just has to be done differently is all I'm saying. And then here is the slow motion version where Filipowski, who supposedly was the victim, if you can go back, you can see here he reaches out his arms to push that guy and he trips him. He sticks his leg out, trips him, and then he gets spun around. Nobody's hitting him. Nobody's hurting him. He turned his knee by spinning. So his injury was not some attack by Wake Forest fans, which is certainly how it was presented. That part is completely, that narrative has been debunked by that video right there. Would I want that happening in my player? I'd be pretty angry. And I probably couldn't see that clearly for what it was, which was, why is my player still on the court?
Right.
He made no effort to get off the court.
Mm-hmm.
His first impulse was to swing both fists outward toward a player that was running close to him. But if you look, I mean, a student, that student was on his cell phone. He wasn't trying to attack Filipowski. He was running way too close to him. And to give Filipowski the benefit of the doubt, I think I would understand how he'd be scared. And so you want to protect yourself. Those players have every right to protect themselves. Even if he threw a haymaker at the guy, I wouldn't really fault him because it would be an ugly sort of more of an event that has to be sort of explained away. But if you're going to charge that close to a player, you are in his space, you have a right to get clocked.
He has a right to defend himself. I'm not sure there's enough evidence there when he stuck his leg out that it was intentional. He was trying to trip the guy. I don't know if he just, he has long strides and he was trying to make his way to the sideline and get out of the way. I don't know. Maybe he was trying to intentionally trip him. I don't feel like there's enough evidence there. That's just my personal opinion.
I think if you look at his mindset, that's what we don't know. Was he feeling really scared? Because if he was feeling really scared and he started to do these things that were sort of offensive, then we should give him benefit of the doubt. If he was just being a bad loser, and that's what we don't know, we'll never know, is what was in his mind.
AKA Grayson Allen?
He reminded me of Grayson Allen with the trip. That was completely unnecessary. I don't mind him for pushing the guy further out of his space, but while you're doing that and you stick your leg out, it reminded me of Grayson Allen.
You have to say this was not as obvious as Grayson Allen's one. And he had like 5 of them, I mean, his were
No, nothing like that. And more excusable than Grayson Allen's because this guy's coming in my space. But nonetheless, to paint him as a total victim is really missing a lot of what happened.
That's true. Very true.
But the whole team got let down by Wake Forest's lack of security and police presence, in my opinion.
Well, the first thing I saw in that video that's outrageous is you have about 2,000 students standing on the floor with 5 seconds left. That just should
never happen. Should not happen.
Situation. They shouldn't be on the floor. They should be in their seats. And that, I don't know how you figure out a way to do that, but you've got, as a school, you've got to figure out a way to get your fans to stay in the seats.
Security stands and holds the line to keep everyone off the court because there are certain entrance points that need to be choked off. And I think it can be done if you have ample security. And then you obviously have a cordon of police officers protect the visiting teams. Well, the sideline where there's going to be a handshake and the visiting team. And then after the handshake, the cordon of police officers encircles the visiting team and gets them out of there. Honestly, the winning team doesn't need security. They don't want to come off the floor. They want to go celebrate with their classmates because this is one of the coolest things that's going to happen to Wake Forest players as well. And so you don't want to take
even encircling the Duke bench with security would have been good, but the problem is you still have 5 players out on the court. And if that buzzer goes off and all the fans consider that like, beginning of a sprint race, that's not going to be a good situation either. So you've got to find a way to keep them off the floor. That's number one. And
Yeah.
then when the buzzer goes off, there has to be some reasonable amount of time to let the players get off the floor before there's a storming. So
I think
those are the changes, in my opinion, that have got to happen.
the biggest problem with Filipowski was he made no effort to get off the floor. He made himself a sitting duck in the middle of a sea of Wake Forest fans. If he had moved quickly, I think everyone would have run around him. We wouldn't even be talking about this. Honestly, no one would have gotten hurt. He wouldn't have had to be in that exchange with that student. If there's 1 second left, 0 seconds left, get off the floor. You know
Now,
what I mean?
John Shire said in his video that there have been stormings before against his teams, and that it isn't just this situation, but there have been times where his players get punched, get tripped. Some of the things he was saying, I haven't seen the videos of, but he's claiming that this isn't the first time, and that it isn't just a Filipowski situation. It said his players get punched and tripped as well.
I mean, anytime that happens, there has to be a police presence to arrest those people on the spot. Then that's why I don't want a bunch of people in yellow security shirts on. I mean, police officers who can immediately take someone to the ground, cuff them, and get them out of there. And then when people watch that show of force, everything chills. A show of force is what you need, and that means police officers, not just security. And that was seriously missing. Not only did I not see enough security, I didn't see any police officers, and there was no chance anyone was going to feel any presence of authority.
That's right. Interesting.
And,
well, let's go to
as to previous events, I don't know anything about that, honestly. I think Cameron Crazies are as wild and out of control as any fan base in the country. So it's a little rich for them to be lecturing about what's appropriate. But they're not violent, but they're close. I mean, they're always trying to touch the players, and they're screaming and doing all this stuff in unison, and they're very intimidating as far as their behavior. They're always right on the edge of losing their minds. So
you'll notice that in the football stormings where they storm the field, there isn't as much of an issue. There's a couple reasons for that. The stadiums are a lot bigger,
more space,
and it takes the fans a lot longer to get down off of those stands and down onto the field, especially the ones that are in the upper deck. So football, you don't have the same kind of issue. There's plenty of time for the fans to make their way down on the field while the players clear out. Basketball, you don't have that situation. A lot of these stadiums, you have the fans literally, 5 feet from the floor. And it's a much worse situation to try to police.
According to ESPN, there have been 3 court stormings over the last 3 months, a week. So that's quite a large number. And there's rarely any injuries, So I think what we're talking about is the instances where it goes bad are predictable based on security level. And I think that's the key. And I think most schools do a pretty decent job, even though they probably still need to look at it and figure out how they can be even more strong in those events. But I think most victories in basketball are not worth storming the court over. So you're talking about a relatively small number of times where you need to protect the visiting team, because that's really what you need to protect. So there's a lot of fines that have been placed on schools. SEC has first time is $100,000 to the visiting team that had to suffer through the storming. Second infraction, $250,000, and third is $500,000, and all of that goes to the school that is the victim, so to speak. Pac-12's $25,000, $50,000, and $100,000. Big 12 fines individually, so they fined UCF $25,000 in January, and the Big East fines $5,000, which isn't significant, and then the Big Ten has an interesting sort of case-by-case. University is allowed to do punishment on itself, and fines start on the third offense and whatnot. So
what you're saying is there is some rules in place. They've tried to make some adjustments in the past couple of years. I still think there's been enough controversy out of this one with a top 10 NBA player that they're still going to tighten this up even more. I think there's more changes coming.
Oh,
I
no
think that
question.
I think the not having the fans on the court until the, maybe 10 seconds after the buzzer or something. There's got to be some new tightening up. And then I think there'll be more security. I think that anytime there's a big time program coming in, the schools will, for legal reasons, have a
Yeah.
much tighter security situation.
Yeah. And I think the key is police officers, not security people that are hired that are making, $10 an hour. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just think you don't have the authority to arrest people and
Right.
physically remove them from what they're doing. And I think that authority is pretty strong. You don't have to be mano a mano. All you have to do is start taking one and then the other, and then people calm down.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's a way to stop the students from going onto the floor early. I'd have to look at each stadium even maybe, but how to do that. But there are ways, there are
Mhm.
creative ways.
For sure.
Most important is the cordon of police officers around the visiting team. That's the most important thing.
Agreed. Well, let's look at our next video here. I'm going to pull it up right now. We're going to take a look at a little bit of a reaction by Jay Billis and his crew right after the game.
So strongly that it's time to do away with the fan storm in the court.
Well, Molly, it's not that I feel strongly that it's time. It's been time for a long time. And we actually discussed this a few weeks ago on College Game Day. And my thing wasn't necessarily ban court storming. It was just the idea that fans don't belong on the court ever. And players don't belong in the stands. It's a pretty simple proposition. But, the NCAA and the member institutions will say the player safety is number one. There's nothing more important than player well-being. But that's simply not true because they're continuing to allow this. And in fact, they're encouraging it. And the truth is, we're encouraging it in the media. We put court stormings at the end of every highlight when there's an upset. We're encouraging it. And even though it's banned in the SEC and they have to pay a $100,000 fine on the first offense, and then it goes up to $250,000 or $500, whatever it is, the institutions are happy to pay it because they like the visual. They like having that to take pictures of it, to show it. Here's how passionate we are, and here's what we're about, that kind of stuff. And it just didn't, take a genius to say that something's going to happen. And when it does, let's not act surprised. This is not only foreseeable, it's inevitable. And we've had significant injuries over this in the past, to fans especially. And nothing really changes. But the truth is, nothing's going to change now. We're going to talk about it, and it's going to go away, and nothing's going to change. And if they wanted to stop it, they could stop it tomorrow. The administrators will tell you that security experts tell them that it's not a good idea to try to stop the court storming, that could cause more problems than it would solve. But you don't have to stop the court storming. One time, all you have to do is once they're on the court, don't let them off. Just say you're all detained and give them all citations or arrest them if you want to. And then court stormings will stop the next day. There's no accountability for this. The fans feel like it's an entitlement and the universities like it. And the truth is we like it. Now, one last thing on this. Years ago, when fans would run out on the field or on the court during a game, it was network policy not to show that because we didn't want to encourage it. So what does that say about the way we in the media use these images now? We can't deny that we encourage it, or at least tacitly approve of it. And everybody has to accept some responsibility for this. I don't think it's the right thing to allow this, but I know that it's going to continue. This is not going to stop.
Jay, I wish I could disagree with you, but I can't. I think it's run its course also. And like you said.
So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think he's in the camp of there's no option here but to ban it. I do agree that the most logical argument is that fans don't belong in the court and athletes don't belong in the stands. Well, athletes going into the stands definitely is a bad idea for everybody involved. The athletes can get really hurt. The student in the stands, or there could be a little old lady there or a baby, or it's just that has to obviously be. But I think it's a ridiculous overreaction, an understandable one, because he went to Duke and he's very close to the program. But also, I think so the fact that it hit home for him really drove that point for him. But I think that again, back to my main point, which is there's a sensible way to deal with this, and I don't think the abolitionist of the abolition of running on the court is the only sensible option. I don't think it's. I think it would detract from the big upsets, and I think
I mean, he
that's
does make
a
some good
point.
points. He does make some
Yeah,
good points.
oh, yeah.
There's no question it's being encouraged. It's shown on SportsCenter every single night, every time there's an upset.
Yeah.
The whole concept, because he's an ex-player, so he's looking at it like, look, the fans don't belong on the court, and the players don't belong in the stands. And I know that
Mhm.
I don't know if you and I are in the minority thinking that we need to tighten this up, but still have court storming because
I
it's
think
part of
most
the
people feel that way.
game. But I think there's a big portion of people, I don't know what percentage it is, that feel the way Jay Billis does. He's not in a minority.
Well, yeah, it's easy if you've never stormed a court or you don't really see the value in it to quickly say, let's get rid of it. But if anyone's ever enjoyed it because their team did something special or gone and actually done that on a court or a field, it sort of paints how you see it, I think. So a lot of this is where you're looking at from.
Mhm.
And I think the people who want to ban it are coming from a good place of putting safety first.
Mhm.
I don't think they understand, though, how much it adds
Right.
to the exciting upset. Everyone wants to watch the big, unbelievable thing,
Mhm.
and it puts a big exclamation mark on an upset. And I think there's ways of keeping it without having all this danger around players. That's just insane.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, let's go to our last clip of the night. We're going to show a field storming in football that happened many, many years ago, maybe the greatest finish ever in college football history. The Cal Bears and the Stanford Cardinal. Everyone thought the game was over. There was 2 seconds left. Stanford was up. They kicked the ball off with 2 seconds. Everyone assumed the game was over, to the point where not only were fans coming on the field, but the band was coming on the field to do the after the game celebration. The
Little
Cardinal
trivia.
band.
Little trivia. Do you know who the kicker was?
I don't.
Mark Harmon, the actor.
Was it really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about this, not only is it really exciting play to watch, that's one reason I wanted to show it, but it actually ended up becoming the impetus of a bunch of field changes and security changes for college football. So it wasn't just an exciting play, but NCAA the year after that in the offseason adopted a bunch of security rules, including students couldn't be on the field until 10 seconds after the game was over, after the buzzer went. The idea that with the 10 seconds was to give the players time to get to their sidelines and start filing out. So I think that's a pretty good rule, and I think basketball could do something like that. I really do. Anyway, let's take a look at the clip, and we'll make some comments during it.
Here we go with a kickoff. Harmon will probably try to squib it, and he does. Ball comes loose, and the Bears have to get out of bounds. Rogers along the sideline, another one. They're still in deep trouble at midfield. They tried to do a couple of... The ball is still loose as they get it to Rogers. They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. He's going into the end zone. The Bears have scored, but the bands are out on the field. There were flags all over the place. Everybody's milling around on the field. The Bears have won. The Bears have won. Oh, my God. The most amazing, sensational, dramatic, heart-rending, exciting, thrilling finish in the history of college football. California
That was
I mean, if that,
42 years ago, and we're still talking about it.
but if that doesn't
And
get you
nobody got
pumped
hurt.
up, yeah.
You know?
Well, maybe the one band guy did. But
Yeah, probably. I see all
first of all,
kinds
what
of
were your
things.
thoughts? What were your thoughts about why in the world the fans and the bands are coming on the field in the first place? I thought at
No.
least the common sense thing would be to hear the buzzer go off, then you go on. It's
Yes.
just really
I mean,
strange.
as amazing as that was, we've gotten better since then. We can improve on what we're seeing. Nobody's saying that the band should be on the field, but that energy, you can't create it. It's real, and
Right.
it's palpable, and it's the commentators going crazy. And we're still talking about that 42 years later. If the band hadn't been on the field, I don't think we'd still be talking about that play.
Mm-hmm. Probably.
Because there have been other last second. So, I think there's a way to do this in football as well. There have been a lot of good changes in football to make it more sensible. It didn't take away field storming, but they realized that the most dangerous thing that can happen when you rush the field is bringing the goalposts down.
Right.
Somebody was killed by a post coming down and cracking their head open.
How did you
And
know that was?
so,
How did you know that was Mark Herman as the kicker? I never noticed that.
oh,
But
it's well
when you
known.
said
It's
that,
trivia.
you said that it showed the back of his jersey and it
I
said
know.
Herman.
Yeah, well, that's where he got famous from.
Did he ever talk about it, like what it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
to be on the losing end of that?
Yeah,
Brutal.
devastating. But that's how he became famous.
He could have just
And then
kicked
he
it out of
started to go into
bounds.
acting, and yeah, he's been in everything ever since. So, yeah,
That was an exciting play, but yeah, that was the
incredible.
impetus of football really getting a hold of it. And I think they've done a good job. There's been very few stormings, and when they do happen, they're more orderly. There's
Right. And
nobody getting hurt.
they've also they've realized what's the biggest danger here? The goalposts coming down. So a lot of teams will put braces up to where it's impossible to bring them down.
Right.
They also some actually lower and go to the ground, and they I think attach to the ground so it can't even be removed.
They've experimented with all kinds of fences around fields. They've done that.
Yeah.
Ones that you can climb over. I know. Remember at Virginia, there was a barrier you had to actually climb over.
Yeah,
So
we had to
it
climb
wasn't
over a
like
brick wall.
yeah, you couldn't storm right away. So
Yeah.
I think that this Filipowski thing is going to be the impetus for the NCAA to continue to tighten things up, and I think this will. I'm hoping solve it. I think we'll still see stormings, but they'll be more orderly, and you won't have hopefully any players hurt. That's really what we all want.
I think the ACC higher ups, conference officials, and everything understand that there's two sides to this, and there is a wing of the group that is for protecting this court storming, but also realizing that you can't see what happened at Wake Forest happen again.
Right.
There has to be some more sensible way to do that. And then the other half is let's get rid of it. It doesn't add any value. It adds extreme risk to players, but also the students rushing. You slip down in the middle of that, you might not live. So, I recognize the dangers here, but that's part of life too.
No doubt. No
Life's
doubt about it.
a little bit like that.
Well, any final thoughts about this incident this past weekend, going into what the NCAA is going to do about it, and then we'll close out.
Well, I hope Filipowski's okay. I hope that nobody else gets injured going forward. Of course, stormings will probably still happen. And I just hope that we take a more sensible, sober approach to make more sense than what we saw at Wake Forest.
Completely agree. And when we storm, guys, let's be a little safer next time. We don't want it to go away completely. So.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody very much for coming to this episode. We'll see you next time. We got a lot of good content coming up. And
All right.
signing out.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.